Brian Kelly just got fired at LSU, and Irish fans are eating it up. But what does it actually mean for Notre Dame? Luke Smith joins me to talk about Kelly's downfall, Notre Dame's second half outlook, and what the Irish need to do to finish 10-2 right here on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily home for Notre Dame football. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, a producer at Fox Sports, and I've been covering the Irish since 2020. It is Tuesday, October 28th, and thanks as always for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And before we dive in, please take a second to make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel or following along wherever you get your podcasts. I also wanted to remind you that we are taking questions for the Friday mailbag before Notre Dame takes on Boston College, so be sure to submit yours in the comments or on social media. Now, as for today, we have got Luke Smith back on for our weekly episode, but since Notre Dame had the weekend off, we're going to shake things up a little bit. First, we're going to react to the big news that Brian Kelly has been fired at LSU. If you did not tune in for Sunday Night Live, I'd encourage you to do so because you can see my live reaction to the news once it broke. But today, we're going to dive into how it fell apart, what it means for Notre Dame, and what is going to come next in the coaching carousel. Then we'll get into what the Irish need to fix after the bye week, including red zone execution and the pass rush, plus our expectations for the final 5 games and why this team has what it takes to make a run for the college football playoff. Enjoy. All right, Luke Smith is back with me here, and we have got to start with the biggest story in college football. Brian Kelly is fired at LSU, and even though he hasn't been Notre Dame's coach in years, there's still a connection that is impossible to ignore. So what was your reaction when you saw that news break?
My reaction was how the turntables, because I was watching that game Saturday night. It was ugly, real ugly. Got ugly in a hurry too. And it's, one of those things where I'd still think that Notre Dame should have beat Texas A&M. So actually in that first half, I'm watching that game and I'm thinking, how did we lose to these guys? And then they play a really good second half, blow LSU out. That's kind of besides the point. But it really just causes a lot of reflection on Brian Kelly's departure from Notre Dame and tenure at LSU, because despite that poor start against Florida State on Labor Day back in 2022, thanks to Brian Polian's special teams unit, Brian Kelly's LSU tenure actually got off to a pretty good start, while Marcus Freeman's Notre Dame tenure did not. Kelly beats Alabama in year 1. He makes the SEC title game and really probably would have made the playoffs with 2 losses, even in the 4-team format, but then they lose to this zombie A&M team Thanksgiving weekend, and that kind of takes them out of that. Then they get blown out by Georgia in the SEC title game. But then as the next year, Freeman starts to find his stride a little bit. Kelly has the Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels. So while the defense is terrible, they're still, doing pretty well, putting up a bunch of points. But I thought it was interesting today listening to Irish Illustrated and hearing John Bryce of Football Scoop say that Mike Denbrock leaving LSU really cut Brian Kelly to his core. And while I think the amount of talent and the other hiring on his staff that Freeman had done are equally responsible for the success of the last 2 seasons, it is funny how since Denbrock came to South Bend, the fortunes of the 2 programs really went in opposite directions. And, I thought Brian Kelly would do better. He did not. And maybe his comments some years ago, and I don't know if it was the Alabama series was scheduled or what series was scheduled, but he basically made a point about, I don't care about that. I'm going to be on a beach drinking pina coladas somewhere. Maybe that should have been a sign that this LSU thing was kind of just a payday and not really as much of a national title chase as we all thought.
The more stuff that comes out, it all just looks so much worse for Brian Kelly. So I was doing a show when I saw the news, reacted live, and there had been rumblings that people in LSU were really mad at him just for being an underdog against Vanderbilt. Then they lose that game to his former defensive coordinator, and then they lose to Texas A&M at home in embarrassing fashion to another former defensive coordinator of Brian Kelly's. And at first I thought he's definitely going to try to get another job. There's no way he's going to want to go out like this. But the more we hear about it, the more it seems like he was checked out to begin with at LSU, and that is not a place you could be checked out at. And I actually agreed with the notion when he left Notre Dame that winning a national championship is easier to do at LSU than it is at Notre Dame because Ed Orgeron had just done it and Les Miles had just done it. So if those two buffoons could win a national championship at LSU, I thought Brian Kelly would certainly be able to. And now he is the first head coach at LSU since Jerry DiNardo, who was hired in 1995 to leave LSU without a national championship. So it went horribly for him. And I think that just because it's easier to do doesn't mean it's easy. And I think in his mind, he thought it'd be relatively easy, and it's still very, very hard. And he didn't work nearly hard enough to do it.
Yeah, there also might be a common thread there is that if you're associated with Notre Dame, you probably shouldn't take the head job at LSU because you won't have a ton of success with Jared DiNardo and Brian Kelly being the common link there. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I'm actually a little bit angry at myself now. You mentioned the live show you're doing. I forgot to wear the Brian Kelly gritty shirt tonight. We'll have to pull up a picture of that at some point. But I don't know. That's going to be a vintage collector's item now, I guess, at this point. Nobody will know what it is, but it's out there.
It is. I also saw a former recruiting staffer at LSU post that video of him dancing with the recruit and said, now that he's gone, I can finally say this. This made me cringe so unbelievably hard. And she is not alone. It seems like a bunch of former players, former staffers, members of the support staff, athletic department, all of that. They have all come out to dance on Brian Kelly's grave. And it proves the same point that I said with James Franklin. If you're likable, if you fit the culture, that's going to help you out later on when things aren't going as poorly as they are now. Because like James Franklin probably should not have been fired off merit, even though the season has been a disaster for them. He has just been such a jerk to so many people in the Penn State athletic department for years that they were waiting for him to slip up so that they could make this move. And even though Brian Kelly hasn't been at LSU nearly as long as James Franklin was at Penn State, it seems like people within the athletic department and just all around that university were waiting for Brian Kelly to slip up. He does again in his fourth year, and they were ready to kick him out immediately.
Yeah, and I guess it just it kind of helps put into perspective. It is pretty remarkable just seeing how many people have a problem with him, and some of it I think is unfair. To be sure, like some of the stuff that people say about him and what he may or may not have been responsible for, I just think is kind of reckless and using something for the purpose of an agenda. But it's funny because I think now that Notre Dame has a head coach who is so likable, not only within the program, but just nationally, it puts into perspective just kind of like how unlikable Brian Kelly was, but you kind of just like ignored it because he won a lot of games. But then you compare who he followed at Notre Dame in our lifetimes, and none of those guys were likable. I mean, look at that, like Charlie Weiss, Bob Davie, Tyrone Willingham, nice guy, but like really meek guy, didn't recruit at all. Like they just hadn't had anybody who the fan base could really embrace. And that's what they've been waiting for so long. And they finally have that now. And it's a lot more helpful, that frame of reference 4 years later, that, this is a lot better.
Do you get the sense that all of his deficiencies and all the things that people in and around Notre Dame didn't like about Brian Kelly became far worse at LSU? Like he got that paycheck and was more than happy to coast even more. Because look, when he was at Notre Dame, people said he didn't recruit hard enough, didn't make time with his players, didn't really show that he actually cared about them as people, was a little bit too standoffish, all that stuff. Like we had heard that before. But then you hear these reports out of LSU that they were hiring people to join his staff that had barely any contact with Brian Kelly, and they were getting players in the portal, and they were making these serious decisions. And during the most critical points of the college football calendar, he's out on vacation. So it seems like not only all the red flags that were already there ended up becoming true, it actually happened in a worse way at a program that has extremely high expectations.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I think there are definitely a lot of reports out there that seem to indicate that he did coast and it got worse. But I think also the other reality of this situation is that LSU recruits itself. I don't think they're going to lose a lot of recruits over this news. So
they got a commitment today.
Yeah, from Louisiana Tech. LSU wasn't good enough for this guy to go for when Brian Kelly was there. But now that he's gone, he's good too. I don't think that's really the issue. It recruits itself. I do think the other thing is that people forget too is that when he took over, Yes, they have a lot of resources. Yes, it's in a recruiting hotbed. It was a mess because Ed Orgeron was bringing like his girlfriend's kids to practice and letting them mess up practice. And we had all sorts of issues. Like it was an absolute mess. And I think if you really dig into it, you will find some LSU people who will say that Brian Kelly helped a lot from just providing organization and structure. But when the expectation is national championships, then, that obviously didn't live up to that standard. You didn't even make the college football playoff. And the thing that's funny to me is when I hear LSU people say like, oh, it's just like, it doesn't look like LSU football. It's like, you should have known that as soon as you hired him. Like that's not LSU football. Look at Brian Kelly from Massachusetts. What were you expecting, I guess is my question.
That's a good point. And he had the family press conference thing, and there were all of these warning signs, and then it just continued to get
weirder
worse.
Looking back. Like, yeah. I kind of forgot how strange some of those videos are.
Yeah, now that we know how everything turned out, it's embarrassing, one, but then it's like, man, maybe they should have seen this coming all along. But gun to your head, is Brian Kelly done, or do you think he gets another job?
It seems like a lot of people seem to think he's done. And maybe he does just want to drink pina coladas on the beach and play golf. It sounded like he, carded 400 rounds, I heard, down in Baton Rouge the last few years and still was averaging a 95. So I don't know if I believe that. But part of me does think he has too much pride to go out like this. But at the same time, I'm not sure what type of job he'd be willing to take because I think he's too proud to go down a level, like to a tier 2 job. But I don't think there's a ton of elite programs that are going to offer him right now, and he's not getting any younger. So I don't know.
He could get another job, but you're right. It's a matter of would he be willing to take it? Because, the Jonathan Smith thing at Michigan State has not been going well. Brian Kelly obviously has roots in Michigan from his time at Grand Valley State. I think that if Brian Kelly were to say, hey, I would coach at Michigan State, they would gladly take him in a heartbeat, but I don't think that's the job he wants to take. To go from Notre Dame and LSU to Michigan State, that's obviously a significant downgrade from those two previous stops. But I was talking to you about this today. I really think that if Brian Kelly does decide he wants to get back into coaching, he needs to go to UCLA where he can relax. It's actually part of the culture in Westwood to really not work that hard. And as long as he's cool with going 7-5, 8-4 every year, maybe they get one Big Ten upset every season. He'll probably try his hardest to join Riviera Country Club, which is where they play the Genesis tournament every year. Although I don't think he'd even get in because apparently admissions are pretty stingent over there. So maybe he tries to do that, gets a nice house in Manhattan Beach and sort of coasts to the end of his career. But he's also 64, man. Like he's getting up there. And I don't really know what he's going to do. But at this point, with all the reports of him out there, I think he does end up retiring, which is crazy that this is how the Brian Kelly coaching era ends. And this might be the last that we see of him.
Yeah, it is remarkable that for a guy who had never been fired, which is pretty difficult to do, there's not many coaches, if any, out there, I think, that haven't been fired at this point, that this is just the unceremonious end that he meets. But maybe that's what it was always destined to be, with kind of the unceremonious way in which he departed Notre Dame.
We're going to be right back with Luke in a moment to talk about how this crazy coaching carousel is going to impact Notre Dame. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about this awesome promotion, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. All right, here's my pick. So we're talking NBA. I'm going to look at the NBA Finals odds, and right now you can get the Denver Nuggets plus 700 to win the NBA Finals. I think they still have the best player in the world, which is why I like the Nuggets to win it all. I think that's pretty good value at plus 700. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So how do you think this coaching carousel is going to impact Notre Dame? Because you already have some big-time jobs open with Florida, LSU, Penn State, Poor Penn State fans. I mean, they probably thought that was the best job available, and now it's not even in the top two. And who knows what else is going to happen? Auburn could get. I expect that job to be open up soon. Wisconsin, maybe. So there's going to be a lot of big-time job openings and very few good coaches to go around. And I've already made the point that I don't think Marcus Freeman is going to leave, but I do expect the Notre Dame coaching staff as a whole to be impacted by this already crazy coaching carousel.
Yeah. So I was actually trying to make a list earlier of all the jobs that are open right now and then what I think will open. And so you said some of them, but LSU, Penn State, Florida, Arkansas, Virginia Tech, Oklahoma State, Stanford, UCLA, Oregon State, probably Nebraska if it's Matt Rule at Penn State. And USF probably opens. That guy probably gets a job. Tulane opens. John Sumrall gets a job. And then I think maybe, like you said, Michigan State, South Carolina is a possibility. NC
Maybe
State,
Ole Miss if Lane leaves.
Clemson, I think that's still an option. I mean, they're 3 and 4. There are a lot of jobs, and the one rule I've decided to take with college coaches is never say never. However, I don't anticipate Marcus Freeman leaving unless some crazy NFL job opens, or if by happenstance Ohio State opens and maybe they want to talk to him. But what I will say is there's an egregious amount of job openings with more to come, like I just said, and there's really very few viable candidates for all of these openings. And that's why I continue to question some of these schools, like just the impatience that they're exhibiting. And I understand that sometimes things run its course and it just becomes too toxic. You need to let it go. But who are you going to get? That's the one question that I always ask. And I just think it's the same people messing up over and over and over again. But with all these openings, I think either Notre Dame is opening its checkbook even more to bump some assistant salaries, or some of these guys are just going to end up getting big jobs.
Yeah, outside of all the head coach openings, there are going to be a lot of very attractive coordinator positions opened up. Like, just think defensive coordinator at Penn State, that's a really good job. And again, just totally speculating here, but if Penn State, they hire a coach who has some relationship with Mike Mickens and then they offer him a DC job, like, he's going to take that, because being a defensive coordinator for a top program is better than being the DB's coach at Notre Dame, even though he's done a terrific job. So I think Notre Dame is going to have a hard time retaining all of their position coaches. It doesn't seem like Mike Denbrock is too interested in becoming a head coach, but honestly, like, who knows? Maybe his stock is higher than it's ever been before, because look at what happened to LSU without him. But it doesn't seem like he's very interested in that. But with all the dominoes that are falling here, it seems impossible for any big-time program to come out of this unscathed.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I feel like that's kind of what happens every year, right? Is you always say like over 1.5 coaching changes on your staff, but this year maybe it's even more. So I don't know, but I do anticipate there will be some level of change. It's funny because if we had this conversation a month ago, I mean, maybe we're saying like, well, Chris Ash is out and then we're just going to get Mickens or whoever to take over for him. But I think Chris Ash is going to be around next year because he's done a pretty damn good job the last month. So I don't know.
What if Chris Ash goes back to Florida, just spend some time with the Jaguars? What if Chris Ash gets the Florida job after all this?
Or what if Urban takes the Florida job again and Urban hires him? Yeah. Anyways, I didn't say that, but it's out there.
People are suggesting that LSU give Urban Meyer a call. I love that. I love that we're still doing that.
I actually
with Urban
think
Meyer.
It would be a very fun exercise. Not going to do it on this show, but just to try to guess who all these schools are going to hire and like, any of the potential domino effects of those jobs, and just put names down now, because I think anybody that does that, is myself included, is just going to be wildly off base on a lot of these.
All right, well, now that you bring that up, let's pick the top 3. Who do you think is going to take the LSU job, the Florida job, and the Penn State job?
I think the Penn State job will be Matt Rule. I think that's like kind of like an open secret that's like done, basically, from everything I gather. I think the Florida job will be I think it's going to be Lane Kiffin. I do.
Oh, you think Lane would be more likely to go to Florida than LSU?
I think he has a reverence for Steve Spurrier that potentially brings him there if he does go anywhere. LSU, I I don't know. Like, is it crazy to say they hired just Joe Brady? I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like they'd
Brady
get a
has any
splashy
desire
name.
to do college.
Yeah.
He just didn't recruit when he was the OC there, and he was so eager to get to the NFL.
Yeah, that's true. I have no idea who LSU would hire.
I think it goes Matt Rule to Penn State. I think James Franklin goes to Florida. He just seems like a perfect fit for all the wrong reasons. And then LSU is either going to get Lane Kiffin or they're going to get Summerall, the coach of Tulane. And after that, I mean, who knows? Because it's going to get crazy. Auburn will probably get into some weird situation as well, as they always do. I mean, they just hired Hugh Freeze. I really don't think the Wisconsin job is going to open up. They don't really seem to have an out.
They have to. They can't score. That's the worst program in America right now for a Power 4 school. I mean, that's just you can't run that back.
It doesn't seem like Wisconsin is really invested in NIL. So you look at what Notre Dame would play next year. It's either going to be Fickle and their last-ditch effort with a roster that can maybe compete in the Big Ten, or just a brand new program entirely.
I think there's a pretty easy answer for them, and he's right down the road on the North Shore of Chicago. It's Pat Fitzgerald.
Do you think they do that? I mean, he's probably not very expensive.
He just got cleared of everything. He got paid a lot of money, actually, through that lawsuit. So, I mean, I think if not Wisconsin, I think Stanford might come calling Pat Fitzgerald's way, and I think he'd be more likely to take Wisconsin.
Before Luke and I dive into our expectations for the Irish as they close out the regular season, I want to tell you about Game Time. College football is back, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It is the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying, and I love the zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So, take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. It has been a very interesting college football season, to say the least. And now, as we shift gears here, Notre Dame is heading into the home stretch of the season right now. They're one of the most stable teams in the country, but as we've seen in college football, things can change in a hurry. But coming off the bye week, we've seen in the past how Notre Dame has made some drastic improvements. I mean, last year they had the Louisville game, which was a nice win, but it was still just very discombobulated. They go into the bye, and then coming out of that, their offense had an entirely new identity. They smoked Stanford 49-7, and yeah, Stanford wasn't a very good team, but the offense had their most efficient performance of the entire season. So where do you expect to see the biggest improvement this year for Notre Dame coming off their second bye week?
I think we'll start to see more of the consistency on offense we saw against Arkansas and Purdue in terms of putting up points and putting up touchdowns. Part of the reason I think that's dipped in recent weeks is I do think there were some nerves against USC, particularly from CJ Carr, and they missed some opportunities that they shouldn't have. Of course, they missed a field goal too. That was just atrocious. But another reason I think this is the level of competition is going to be quite poor this second half of the season. And I just think Notre Dame should really have a field day offensively. Defensively, I think they're going to finally have a little bit more luck bringing the quarterback down for sacks, because I feel like lately the pressure has really improved, but they don't really have that many sacks. Like, they might have had a couple, like 3-4 the last game, but there's just so many games where I feel like the quarterback is in the grasp and like they're either just getting the ball away, somehow grounding's not getting called, or they're just getting away. And then maybe, just maybe, an opposing kicker will miss a field goal, because I'm pretty sure opponents have only missed one field goal all year against Notre Dame, and that was the end of the first half from A&M.
I'm glad you brought that up, because opponents have just been nails kicking against Notre Dame. And usually it's the other way around. I feel like historically Notre Dame has had pretty good luck with opposing field goal kickers, but I agree with you on all accounts. I figure they're going to figure out the red zone issues and the short yardage issues because, look, they were one of the best red zone teams in the country at the start of the year.
Right.
So we know that they're capable. They just have to fix some of the issues with play calling and scheme. I'm not worried about CJ Carr. I feel like it's not being talked about how poor those conditions were in that game. And even at the start, like it had not been raining for like 30 minutes, but the field was still very wet. It was windy. And then the second half, it was borderline impossible. So I'm going to cut him some slack for his performance overall, not necessarily his interception. That was terrible. And then on defense, not just getting the quarterback down, I think we're going to see the pressure ramp up even more. I expect to see Bryce Young play better. He has been playing better in recent weeks, not to the extent that I thought he would going into this season. The defensive tackles have been better, and they've been using the linebackers a lot more effectively. I mean, that USC game was the best game the linebackers have played all year. Jalen Sneed was in the backfield whenever he was out there on the field, and Boubacar Traore is ascending in a way that he might have to make a difficult decision about whether or not he wants to go to the NFL after this year. So if they clean those two things up, realistically, they should be able to cruise the rest of the way.
I agree. And I think they will be able to. I was saying this, was it after Arkansas? I don't remember what game it was. I compared this to like the 2021 season where the second half of the season, you just see a lot of bad backup quarterbacks potentially and just teams that aren't very good. And that's sort of what I'm seeing. And I think in addition to just gaining more chemistry, a redshirt freshman quarterback getting more starts under his belt, more experience, and a defensive coordinator getting more comfortable with his personnel. They're just vastly superiorly talented to all these teams on the schedule. And I think you'll see that to start play out in the production.
2021 is a great example, too, because that team radically changed after the bye week. They couldn't figure out anything on the offensive line. They squeak by Virginia Tech, then they have a bye. They beat USC pretty decisively, 31-16. They get in that shootout against North Carolina, 44-34. And then after that, they smoked Navy, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Stanford to close out the year. And I could see either Navy or Pitt, one of those two games, just being a little tricky for Notre Dame, not in the sense that they'd lose it. They should probably win both of those games by double digits, but both of those offenses can put up a lot of points. And I do have some concerns about Chris Ash going up against Navy for the first time. I mean, Al Golden even gave up over 30 points in his first game against Navy. Fortunately, Chris Ash has a bunch of assistants who played Navy before. They kind of know how to game plan it. Marcus Freeman even admitted they prepped for Navy during the bye week. But that game, I mean, you and I have talked about the Navy game quite a bit. It's not our favorite game, to say the least. And considering Notre Dame plays Pitt right after Navy, I don't know. I could just see one of those games being a little bit tricky, much like that North Carolina game was back in 2021.
Yeah, I don't feel that way about those two games. We know what happens when Notre Dame plays a good Navy team, and let's also be careful because Navy could definitely lose to North Texas this week. I think North Texas is pretty good. They got that stud freshman quarterback. Navy's kind of escaped the last few weeks too in weird fashion, but what happens when Notre Dame plays a good Navy team? They win by 1,000. And it seems that Marcus Freeman kind of has a personal vendetta against Pat Narduzzi too. If you go back to that 2023 game, I mean, they just beat the absolute brakes off them. And then he puts Kenny Minchie in to take the knee just to twist the knife a little bit more. The only scary thing about that game is the turf at the location formerly known as Heinz Field, because that just is not, that's not safe.
The NFLPA is literally investigating the grounds.
Yeah.
Because it's a safety hazard.
Yeah. Maybe move that game to the Link. I don't know. Move it to Philly. I'm fine with that.
Play at a high school.
Play it at Duquesne. Yeah.
I don't even care, but I did hear that, and that does make me a little bit nervous as well. But I hope that Marcus Freeman has a vendetta out there against Pat Narduzzi. Again, he would never say it publicly, but Pat Narduzzi has had no problems making his feelings about Notre Dame known publicly, and I'm sure that has made its way into the Notre Dame locker room. But
indeed,
again, outside of that, I mean, the schedule is really easy. Boston College is 1-7. Stanford is no good, although they put up a little bit of a fight against Miami in the first half. But I'm hoping that Navy does not lose to North Texas, because I have a good feeling that they would be ranked if they do win that game. And I think Pittsburgh might actually sneak into the rankings as well.
Totally. No, definitely. And that would be fantastic. Obviously, it would also be just kind of hilarious, because I'm thinking back to when I was on this program a few weeks ago we were talking after USC lost to Illinois, and Bud Elliott's talking about how Notre Dame's screwed. They don't have any ranked wins on the schedule. And, since then, it's looking like they had the potential to have 3 ranked wins on the schedule. And also since then, Florida State has not won a game. So that is just funny how that stuff works out.
So do you have any concerns left going into the stretch run?
The only thing that I'm concerned about are injuries, truthfully. Notre Dame's already a pretty banged up team. They can't afford any further, especially on the offensive line. And I think just like with anything, right? You can have a bad game and throw a bunch of picks, but I don't know why. I've honestly kind of felt this way since probably the Boise game, especially just seeing the defense and how they changed. It was like they figured it out. And that was not something that I really expected after the Purdue game, but it was kind of a drastic change, honestly. And they've looked pretty nails since then. And I think they have enough on both sides of the ball where they can play a C game and still win by 20 points against a lot of these teams. So I'm hoping they're not going to play a C game. And I think this is going to be extremely enjoyable to watch too, because they are a fun offense to watch, especially. And this might be the last we get to see Jeremiah Love and maybe Jadarian Price in Notre Dame uniforms. So you can't take that for granted. But I don't have a ton of concerns outside of the uncontrollable stuff.
I agree on the injury front, particularly on the offensive line. I think they are one injury away from being in a pretty dire situation, because Sullivan Absher was always going to be like the first guy off the bench, right? And the first injury that happens is at center, and they go with Joe Otting, who had an awesome game against USC. Is he going to be able to sustain that now that there's film on him? We'll see, but that's very encouraging. But now you have Sullivan Absher starting in place of Billy Schrauth, and now the next question is like, okay, if anyone else goes down, who do you go to? Because a lot of people have been talking about playing Will Black, the freshman, former 5-star. Well, he's been dealing with a concussion. I don't even know how much he's been practicing the past couple of weeks. So he's not healthy either. And I just feel like, especially after what we saw from Silas Prescott in that game against Miami, that worries me a little bit, because if they're able to hold on with this group, make it to the end of the regular season, it looks like they'll get Billy Schrauth at some point. But other than that, they cannot afford one more injury on that offensive line, which has been a pretty cursed group this past year and a half.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we saw the Ashton Craig thing and the Billy Schrauth thing happen live in games. There's the Jaguar incident from the summer, but I'm a little confused how so many of these injuries seemingly happen in practice. And like, also, how did Maddie Augustine and Will Black get concussed in practice? They bump heads in the locker room? Like, I'm just confused how that even happens. And this is a Freeman thing. There's a lot of practice injuries, and I know it's football, it's a violent game, but and I know they're being very physical in a lot of these practices, but they need to find a way to channel that a little bit better, I think.
It is sort of the downside of having really physical practices, which is something that Marcus Freeman is known for. Because you look at the injury report here, Will Black, practice injury. Mikey Gilbert was in a game. Jane Greathouse suffered his injury in practice. He's been listed as questionable for like 5 straight weeks. Logan Thomas, I believe. Matt Jeffrey was a practice injury. Augustine, defensive end Jordan Botello is now listed as questionable with a concussion. I don't really know there. That could have been during the USC game, and we just didn't know. And then Gabe Rubio had his injury in practice as well. So, look, you want to have a physical team, you want to have a physical program, but you're right, it is becoming a little bit of a trend, and I don't think Notre Dame is in a position right now where they're in, a desperate situation at any other position outside of the O-line, but obviously you'd like for some of these injuries to be cleaned up. But I just want to see Greathouse on the field again, just so we can put some of that speculation to rest, because until he goes out there and plays a couple snaps, people and fans are going to continue to wonder on message boards, on social media, like, is Jane Greathouse going to redshirt? Like, what is the deal there? I expect him to play this weekend, but hopefully that gets resolved here soon.
Yeah, you would think he has to. It's pretty strange. I don't think he's transferring, because if he was, I think he'd be not on the sidelines, but it's definitely a strange one.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, we'll call it a day. Next time, who knows what's going to happen in college football, Luke, but we will have you back here next Tuesday to react to the win. Oh, might have just jinxed it against Boston College, but we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to hit subscribe on YouTube or follow on your favorite podcast app and leave a rating or review to help more Irish fans find the show. And we're going to make a slight tweak to the schedule this week. I'm going to have a special guest on the show tomorrow morning. You're not going to want to miss that, so make sure you tune in. And then I will release the Boston College preview episode on Thursday. We'll wrap up the week leading up to the BC game with the Friday mailbag. And of course, we'll have the instant reaction and all that good stuff this weekend. So it's going to be a great week on the show. You're not going to want to miss it. I'll see you tomorrow.